The Amazing Maurice is a 2022 animated film directed by Toby Genkel and Florian Westerman. It's written by Terry Rossio and Robert Chandler, based on the story by Terry Pratchett. The Pratchett story is called The Amazing Maurice and His Educational Rodents. And we have an amazing voice cast, including Hugh Laurie, David Tennant, Himesh Patel, Emilia Clarke, Hugh Bonneville, Rob Brydon. Brilliant, brilliant voice cast. Not really sure why it took me so long to get around to watching this. However, I will say for me personally, it wasn't worth the wait, but it's not necessarily the film's fault. I actually have a lot of praise for this, and I will talk about specific things that I enjoyed in a moment, but I didn't enjoy the narrative. And when I was watching it, when I started watching it, I didn't realise that it was based on a Terry Pratchett story. And I'm not really a fan of Terry Pratchett. I don't dislike Pratchett. I don't think he's a bad writer or anything, of course not. But his styles of storytelling and the stories themselves just generally don't appeal to me. I have tried several. I haven't yet found one that really worked for me. So had I known that going into it, I probably would have thought, well, actually, the story's probably not going to appeal to me. Maybe it was a good thing that I didn't know that because I wasn't expecting to dislike it. But once I realised it was a Pratchett story, I kind of figured, okay, that part of it was never going to appeal to me. And genuinely, I don't care about the narrative. So very briefly, I won't spoil anything, but it's about a talking cat called Maurice. And he has teamed up with some rats for a money-making scheme. I won't say exactly what this scheme is. It's revealed at the beginning of the film, but nevertheless, I won't spoil it completely. And then they go from village to village or town to town with this. And then they go to this town where there are no other rats. And that's a little bit strange. And they have to solve this mystery. And there are various other obstacles along the way. And there are magical elements in this. Well, it's a talking cat. That kind of was a given. And that part of it didn't really appeal to me. The story just didn't work for me personally. But what I will say is that actually it's a very well-written, well-constructed narrative with a really great pacing. Trying to judge it as objectively as possible, I think it's a good narrative. Of course, if you're a fan of Terry Pratchett or this kind of story, you might think otherwise, and I could completely understand that being the case. But I can see why some people might really love this story and enjoy the film because the narrative seems to be very well done. It just didn't appeal to me personally. However, there were other things in the film that I enjoyed. The first, of course, being the amazing voice cast. Absolutely fantastic voice cast. Another thing I liked, the characters. I loved the characters. I loved the character of Maurice. In fact, there wasn't a character in this I didn't like. And that's quite an achievement for a feature film. Usually there's at least one character who just rubs me up the wrong way and I cannot stand them. But not at all. I liked the characters. The antagonists were very well written, really interesting. The characters were great and Maurice was fabulous. And I also really enjoyed the animation style. It's beautiful. Visually, it's absolutely gorgeous. So there was enough in this for me to say I relatively enjoyed it. I can't say I completely loved the film because the story, I just didn't care. I didn't care for it. So that part of it just was never going to work for me. But again, not the fault of the film. I actually think, judging it as objectively as possible, that it seems like a pretty decent narrative, and I do think the pacing was great, the structure was great, the method of storytelling, in my opinion, was pretty decent. I just didn't care about the actual events that were happening. But everything else worked really well, so there was enough in there for me to say that it was pretty decent. That being said, if, like me, you don't really like Terry Pratchett stories or those kind of narratives, I would say it's probably not worth watching because that is still, of course, at the forefront. Unless, of course, you're a fan of any of the voice cast, in which case I'd say, yeah, give it a go because it's watchable, even if you're not a fan of the narrative. And it's always a pleasure to listen to David Tennant. So there is enough in there to make it watchable, even if you don't care about the story. But if you're not bothered about the voice cast and you're not really a fan of this kind of narrative, then I'd say it's probably not worth checking out. But if there's anything that's drawing you to this film, then I'd say it's absolutely worth watching. There is plenty to praise. So even if you don't love every aspect of it, there is so much greatness in other aspects that it's ultimately a pretty good film. I'd love to know what you think of this if you've read Terry Pratchett's story or if you're a fan of Pratchett in general. Did it live up to your expectations? Is it a decent adaptation? I have absolutely no idea, but based purely on the film itself, it's not for me. But if people love it, I can completely understand why. So ultimately, The Amazing Maurice is ultimately not an amazing film for me, but I still didn't mind it. And if it sounds like it would appeal to you, then I recommend it.